Hello, good afternoon. My name is Redbury Krantz, and I don't like Miles Morales. Now, when I say this, the common response is to ask why, and then when I give a reason that many people disregard it as contrarian or nonsensical, but then when you ask for their reasons as to why they like the character, their reasons are particularly, well, shallow, let's say. This video is not meant to tell you what you are or are not allowed to like. I know that when I say this, it typically flies over the heads of those who come in already ready to disagree. However, for those who are willing to sit and have a discussion, I feel like I can provide some insight as to why I have this opinion. Let's start with how I was introduced to Miles Morales. I was introduced to Miles by my godbrother. I was overseas and he handed me the comic. It would have been 1 year since the comic would have come out. It was in 2017, I believe, that I would have read the first Miles Morales comic. And I remember seeing the cover. I was like, oh, who's this? Is this new variant? Because I was aware of Spider-Man Noir at the time. So I was like, oh, it's a variant Spider-Man. Cool. It's like, so what is this? And he's like, oh, it's Spider-Man, but he's black. And he's like, oh, so Peter Parker but black. And he said, no, it was an entirely different character. And the idea of that intrigued me. So I sat and I read the whole comic and I came out and I didn't like it, but I couldn't place my finger on why. It didn't appeal to me. I liked the art. The art was immaculate, very good. But I didn't like Miles. And for the longest time, I didn't know why. Then we fast forward, the movie comes out, and the first movie that is, and everybody around me is praising the movie. I went to watch it with a couple of my friends, and we come out this movie theater, and everybody's like, "Oh, that was such a good movie. Did you see the part where he did X or Y?" And again, I was like, I liked the movie. I liked the art. I thought the music choice was very good. But I still didn't like Miles. But I couldn't place my finger on it. I just knew I didn't appreciate the character of Miles the same way my other friends did. And I find that the response to the movie from people who I'm going to call them normies because, well, you consume media normally. You go, you watch a movie, and you come out and you like the movie, right? It entertained you, and then you go about your life, and you don't go and seek out other media with that character to understand the character more. You just liked the movie, and then you went on with your day. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being that way when it comes to movies and whatnot. However, when you then turn around and call me, on my opinion, less than ideal, that's where I feel like we start having a problem. I couldn't put my finger on why I didn't like Miles until I reread the comic alongside the Spider-Man Noir comic because I wanted to know why I liked Spider-Man Noir and I didn't like Miles Morales. So I sat down and I read the comic and instantly I realized what the problem was. I realized that Miles has no real conflict going on in his life. And normally when you say that, no, he has tons of conflict, and that might be true, but it's normal conflict. And that's not what you come to Spider-Man for. So allow me to elaborate. The original Peter Parker story, as we all know, he was an orphan who lived with his aunt and uncle. He gains his spider powers, and due to his own negligence, Ben Parker is killed. And that sets off a chain of events where Peter, feeling guilt at the fact that his Uncle Ben died, takes up the mantle of Spider-Man and vows that harm, as long as he's around, no person should come to harm, at least in his immediate surroundings. He feels responsible for the people around him because of his power. Now, throughout Spider-Man's many, many comics, Spider-Man has been around for a long time. We've seen Spider-Man's aunt die, his Uncle Ben die, several love interests have also died. He was powerless to stop them, and he just gets up and he keeps trucking because that's what Spider-Man does. He faces adversity and he comes out on top and he moves on. And that's what we come to Spider-Man for. At least that's what I come to Spider-Man for. You might come for something else, and that's fine. Some people come to Spider-Man because they just like his power set, they like his costume. But these are surface level elements, and I feel like the more you look deep into the core of what Spider-Man is, you find that his entire story is just the underdog story. And I've had this conversation with a couple of people, and the immediate response to that argument is, "Oh, but Miles is an underdog. He's his version of Peter Parker dies, and he needs to learn how to be a Spider-Man all on his own." No, wrong. That's false. Why? Well, in the comics, Spider-Man doesn't just instantly die. He's at least allowed to impart some wisdom onto Miles, right? And then the Spider-Man thing comes easy to him in the comics. There's no real struggle in the Spider-Man department, not only because he just picks up everything naturally, but also because he has a support system. Even though his mother and his father can't know, he has a friend who he tells basically everything to. He knows that Peter is Spider-Man. And they did the same thing in the Marvel movies, actually. With Tom Holland, they gave him Ned as a support system, which I feel like diminished his character as well, which is why they kind of had to roll it back near the end. I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they reset. I also didn't like his suit. I thought it was silly, and I'm glad they gave him back the classic red and blue suits. But yeah, Miles doesn't have the same underdog stigma around him. He's in a situation where everything seems to be going right for him in comparison to Peter, and I feel like that is where you start to see the disconnect. Because, and I'd like to pose a question to you. I'd like you to state the differences between Peter and Miles, and you cannot mention the fact that he's a different race. He's not an orphan. He has an uncle in his life. He has a best friend who he can tell things to, and that's it. He's just Peter, but his life is infinitely better because people aren't like, there's no suffering going on around him, right? And I keep repeating that mantra that there's nothing wrong with Miles's life. And when I say that, I don't mean to be disrespectful and say that there's absolutely nothing wrong with his life. I'm sure that there are problems with being Spider-Man and not being able to tell your parents, but in comparison to even Spider-Man Noir, that version of Peter Parker, his aunt and uncle are activists, and the Green Goblin, who is a mob boss, doesn't like that and has his uncle killed. So now Peter is alone with his aunt in the slums, living off of bread and water, right? This reporter comes around and he takes Peter under his wing, and Peter has to work his way up the corporate ladder with J. Jonah Jameson while also trying to figure out what's going on with the Green Goblin and whatnot. And it's a whole ordeal, right? And then I look at Miles' life, and again, I just don't see where the same thing is coming across. And I feel like they could have made it work a little better by tweaking a few things, right? You can still have his family be present in his life, right? I feel like they should have just focused on the fact that all these things are happening around him and he can't tell his parents. Take away the rest of his support system, and I feel like you have a fairly decent character. You can take away his friend. You can make his Uncle Aaron more sympathetic. Make it so that instead of a convict, he's an ex-convict, right? And then immediately, I feel like you have a more compelling character, because now I feel more sympathy for him when his uncle dies because he's trying to do right by Miles, right? I feel more sympathy because he can't go to his parents about everything. He has nobody. You need to take away the parts of Miles that are more normal, I feel like. And just by taking away that support system, just by making not everything come easy to him, which I will admit they tried to do in the movie, right? They did it poorly, but it did. I can see where they tried to do that in the movie. But yeah, I guess that's all from me. Yeah, that's it.